folks. The Field and Garden Podcast is honored to be partnering with the Growing for Market magazine. They have been publishing practical ideas and information for direct market flower and vegetable growers for over 31 years. All the articles are written by farmers who get their hands dirty and know what they're doing. The magazine is still on the same mission as when the Flower Farmer book author Len Basinski founded this magazine back in 1992 to connect growers with the best ideas from other growers. There is dedicated flower content in every magazine, a decade's worth of back issues, and over 1,600 archived articles from writers like Aaron Benzenkane, Gretel Adams, Pamela and Frank Arnowski, and Jonathan and Megan Leiss, all available on the website. With 10 new issues every year available on paper, digital, or both, you're guaranteed to find something to fine-tune your farm in growing for market. So if you do farmers markets, CSA, farm stands, pick your own, florist sales, or wholesaling, whether you're a commercial grower or you just want to grow like one, subscribe to Growing for Market for the nitty-gritty details of growing, marketing, and the business of local farming. And I have a special offer for you. Use the coupon code WORKSHOP to get 25% off any subscription to the original Farmer to Farmer magazine at growingformarket.com. Hey folks, welcome back to another Field and Garden Podcast. It is your friend and host Lisa Mason Ziegler of thegardenersworkshop.com, and I just appreciate you dropping in for this because today's topic, I think, is something I wished somebody would have kind of like knocked on my door years ago to like consider some of these things. And so I'm thinking about, I'm always tweaking and changing my business. And I think that's the secret to business, right? Is if you ever just stop considering what should I edit out, what should I add in, what do I need to kind of tweak up or squeeze here or push there, or what are the possibilities? And then most importantly to me, which has really become a big part of my focus, or a big part of my focus is, how do I want my business to fit into my lifestyle, into my life? I look back at the first 10 years of me flower farming, and friends, I will tell you, I worked like a wild woman. I mean, I pretty much worked from sun up to sundown, 6 days a week. We don't work on Sundays. That's the only reason I survived, I think. But then I had the wake-up call of like, all right, why is this business ruling my life? I'm the one in charge. I thought I went into business to be my own boss. Well, I'm not being quite bossy enough in the right spots, right? So that started an evolution of me, making my business fit into certain hours, which was really wonderful. And that's what really has me still here today, right? But I also think a part that was missing for me in that was I just kept doing the same things over and over. And you have to remember that when I started flower farming in 1998, we barely had the internet. There weren't all these ideas like people get today. I mean, you just have to spend a nanosecond on social media and see other people doing things differently than you. And, it's so easy to be jumping from idea to idea and to never really find your niche. But anyway, that's a good thing if you find a way to control it. And I'm just sharing some of the questions that I might be asking myself today. If I was flower farming, whether you're doing it small or big, no matter your size. I mean, all the same rules apply. Whether you're doing 15 bouquet subscriptions a week or you're selling 15 $100 twice a week to florist. I mean, it just, there are some basic things that we could think about. The first one for me, I mean, I look back and think, why did I not see that? This mountain was sitting right in front of me and I didn't even notice it. So this is question number one. Did I have enough flowers for the customers that I have? And this is just so crazy, y'all. So we had lots of customers. I started out selling in 1998 to just flower shops. In 2001, I joined the first farmers market in our region, which was the Williamsburg Farmers Market. And then I started adding all these as I ramped up my business, you quickly learn that you need to have more than one outlet for your flowers. If you're growing a lot of flowers, because not every outlet is like demanding all of your production. And so as I was doing that, there were some flowers that we sold to 23 florists and flower shops, 2 supermarket chains, a bouquet subscription, a members only, on-farm private market, which is basically just a private farmer's market to keep me in line with the city ordinance. And of course, we did farmers markets for 14 years. So we had a lot of different things going on. But there were just a few flowers that I just never had enough of. For instance, Bells of Ireland, which was my sister's all-time favorite to build. The way that Bells of Ireland grow in a garden is really different than the way you see them come through wholesalers. They were kind of branchy, and she loved building bouquets around them. I mean, it was like this great filler stem that you could just like build on. But she never got many of those because my very first commercial customer, which was Colonial Williamsburg for about 15 years, would buy every stem I would put on the list. And of course, I always put every stem I had on the list because in my mind, it was like, well, how do you know the next customer is going to buy it? I always put pretty much my whole offering. So it took me a long time, friends, to figure out, well, I wonder, and I have limited space. I'm in the city. I don't have endless opportunities for more space to grow. So it was like a decision making. All right, I need to consider perhaps, I should have considered stopping growing XYZ that didn't sell very well so I can plant more Bells of Ireland in the fall, right? I mean, this is one of those questions that I was just too exhausted and hot and busy and overwhelmed to kind of think about some of this stuff. And it may seem crazy to you, but let me tell you something, friends. When you start flower farming and you do it where I am, where, you have a summer of 95 degrees and 80% humidity, and I mean, you're just hot and tired all the time. Your brain is fried. Anyway, that's the first question I would ask. So I'd have to step back and say, those flowers that I'm growing because I love them really aren't selling that great. But yet here's this other flower that I just never seem to have enough of. And the Dave Dowling rule is if you're not bringing home 20% or having 20% left over, you're not growing enough. You always want your last customer to have choices or for you to have choices to make their bunches from. So, I also want to just pause for a moment. I wanted to just share that, the name of this podcast is Field and Garden. And it's named that because I really wanted people to understand that I am 100% a field grower. My little farm is basically just gigantic, oversized, on steroids gardens. I have no hoop houses or greenhouse structures. I can't because of city ordinances. So the field part of my name was to let people know this is all about growing outdoors. And that also keeps me very relevant and very in touch with home gardeners. Anything I talk about, home gardeners can do at home too. So I just wanted to say that as I was talking about growing the right flowers, you do have to know that I grow everything outside. So you'll not hear me talk about structures for that very reason, right? So the other thing that I think, and I still didn't even think about this until I met somebody that was doing it, and they shared it with us, was if you're an outdoor grower like I am, you tend to have a lot of flowers during the warm growing season, which is the longest growing season for me here and the most commonly grown in season. It's like the summer, right? And that's, while we have through cool flowers have really ramped up. In fact, our spring is our biggest season, and then fall can be a big season. Summer was always my biggest season. And what I find for some people is that summer is slow. So it's like, all right, during the time that you have the biggest production, when your garden is really going after it, is that the slow time for you, or is it a busy time? Because, so for instance, we have friends that are up in Rhode Island, and their farm is near a summer destination spot, an upscale summer destination spot. So they are busy as heck during the summer, which is not always the case for everybody, because florist and farmers markets tend to slow down because people are vacationing. Once the wedding season is over, for us here, that would be July and August. That's when we would typically have a lot of flowers, but those customers slow down, and supermarkets even. But what I did is, because that's my big season in my situation, and I wanted my business to be busy then, that's what I built my business around, was figuring out how to sell more flowers during that season. So that's what you have to think about. It's like, all right, was I overrun with flowers but not customers? Maybe I need to look at what I'm growing, what I'm offering. So that's a really big question. It's like, all right, if you want to do this organically, I'm not talking about growing, I'm talking about building your business and molding it to what presents itself. This is a really good question. When you had the most flowers, did you have the customers, or do you need to swap one of those, change what you're growing perhaps, or look for a different set of customers? And here's another really big one, particularly if you have a young family. Did your family need you during that high volume time, which again is typically summer for a lot of people? Was it like, were you pulled in? Was your body literally pulled apart by your garden calling you, your customers calling you, but your family also calling you? Y'all normally take, let's just say, a 2-week vacation in the summer. That is really hard to do if you have a big annual garden that you're maintaining. I mean, I don't care how many employees, but I will say that the majority of flower farmers don't even have employees. This is like a side hustle for them. This is, the part-time job for the mom, or the ramping up step of your business. So if your family needs you in summer and there's really no option around it, maybe y'all have a summer house. Maybe you have a bigger family, extended family vacation that you really aren't in control of. These are just thoughts. I'm not saying you have to adhere. I'm just saying these are things. There are fixes for every issue, y'all. That's the whole point of being in business, is that you are now in the driver's seat, that you can consider the possibilities and fix this. So did your family need you in the summer, or in spring, or in fall, or, it's or. You fill in the blank. And here's the other thing, and I know that there's people suffering from it right now. It's the end of October. Were you so overwhelmed because of the abundance of summer usually? Did you not plant like you were supposed to for fall blooms? And or you never got to cool flower planting, which is your spring blooms? So many of us, and this was me, y'all, I had so many flowers in the summer. I spun my wheels those years before I really built my business to sell all my summer flowers, I was so busy managing the abundance of summer flowers, which a good portion was not even selling, that I never got in midsummer to plant the garden, the succession planting that was going to be blooming in fall, which is when the demand ramps up again. And then worse yet, I didn't align my garden to allow me to plant cool flowers like I wanted to. You know, it's like this big snowball, y'all. It's like the big snowball that rolls out of control once you're out of the driver's seat. So if you're in fall and don't have enough flowers, there is a really simple fix for that, friends. You just have to plan. And, you know, I often talk about, I mean, it's in my books, it's in my courses, talks about that big calendar that hangs on the big jumbo at a glance, 2x4-inch squares for each day, how we fill it in during the winter months. And it tells me in late June, early July, what to be starting so that we have flowers in fall. Because I can tell you at the end of June, oh my gosh, June is like a crazy time. Our cool flowers are in high production and our summer flowers are also producing. It is like Crazyville. You don't want to have to think. So, do you have enough fall flowers? And are you going to have enough spring flowers? The highest demand season in the year, right? So, here's another question. Who is your customer anyway? You know, so who are you selling to? Are you kind of just not really cultivating customers? Or I will tell you, you're only as good as your last sale. Somebody told me that back when I first launched my online part of my business back in 2005. And I was so discouraged by that statement. And you shouldn't be, but it's the truth. Just because you had an awesome week at the farmer's market this week doesn't mean you're going to have awesome weeks every week. You worked for that, and you're going to have to continue working, continue cultivating. And who is your customer? Do you need to shift gears? Do you need to shift? Like, I will tell you, the scariest thing I ever did was walking away from the first scary thing I did was, well, I do some, you know, my theory is that I have to be a little scared every day in business or you're not growing. But one of the most memorable scary things that I did was when I left the Williamsburg Farmers Market, when I launched in 2005, the Gardener's Workshop, the online portion. I knew that we could not continue that was that's a very successful farmer's market. And I knew when I left there, I could never get back in. And it was really, really scary for me. But I was taking a big step that had a bigger picture. So that was really, really scary. I was changing customer gears. And then when then that evolved, and about 4 or 5 years later, we after we got the Gardener's Workshop online business under our belt, we knew we had to grow more flowers. We needed more ways to sell them, and we rejoined farmers markets. But of course, I couldn't get back into that Williamsburg market, so I had to go to other markets. Well, none of those markets ever compared to Williamsburg. And so we did those markets and cultivated for years, and we did an okay business. But it was an easy change for me to switch gears when I embarked on supermarkets. But before I gave up those farmers markets, which was steady income, my farm was in high production year. I had 5 or 6 people harvesting. We were producing 10 to 15,000 stems of flowers a week off of my 1.5 acre working cutting garden, y'all. You do not have to have much space. And in fact, I say the more space you have, the lower your production comes. So often that is the case. And so I had a payroll. I had a lot of bills to pay. And so it was super scary when I made the decision and learned about supermarkets. My goal was to let go of farmers markets, right? We didn't want to do weekend work. We didn't want to rely on weather. We wanted to have steady, pre-sold business at the end of the week. And that's what supermarkets were going to do for us. But for 1 year, before I could let go of those, we were then doing 3 other farmers markets. For me to let go of those markets for 1 year, we did supermarkets and we did the farmers markets. It about killed us. But that was because of my fear of losing those customers. Friends, there are endless types of customers. You just have to figure out what your customer is and what you want to serve, and you make those customers. So that's a question. And here's another really great question, which talking about high production and how much we produced from such a small space here on our farm. Years ago, my sister and I went to a farm conference, and it was a bigger farm. I think it was like maybe 8 or 9 acres or something. And back then, I only had my whole property, including my house and my outbuildings, was only 1.17 acres. Back then, I only had 2 quarter-acre working cutting gardens. And I'm telling you, I had skinny pathways. I squeaked every inch of growing space out of it. And so I was doing, oh my goodness, we were doing a bang-up business. And this was back pre-2005. So my sister and I went to this farming conference and went to this farm, and we had such expectations because it was so much bigger than mine, right? And after we were there for several hours, and then on the ride home, Suzanne, my sister, who back then was just somebody, she was just helping me. She wasn't really into gardening and farming. She would just do whatever I asked her to do and was willing to learn anything, right? On the way home, she said, maybe I don't understand how this all works, but it seems to me that you produce almost as many flower stems from your little gardens as they do from that big wide open space with those big mowed areas between beds. And she was exactly right. I have come to figure out that when you are faced with having small spaces like I was, and I was determined to make a certain amount of money, and I was going to squeeze it out of the space I had, I learned to intensively plant and build my soil like nobody's tomorrow. And even when I had 2 quarter-acre gardens, I was squeezing 4,000 to 5,000 stems a week in season out of that space. That's a lot of flowers, y'all. Week after week after week. Because when you're faced with small space farming, you harvest every stinking stem, because you either harvest it to put it in your bucket or you harvest it to drop it in the pathway as a throwaway because it's blemished. Because if you want more flowers to grow, you've got to get rid of the old flowers. And if you leave old flowers in your garden, I can tell you from firsthand experience now. So now that we're in a different spot, we're in 2022. We now no longer sell flowers. We grow flowers now for education, photography, creating classes and webinars and so forth. So not every bed gets cut like it should. And I can tell you how quickly, if you start skipping 1 harvest, then 2 harvests, that bed quickly stops producing. And worse yet, you think you have flowers and you go to that bed, but when you get up close, you realize those blooms are really old. You shouldn't even be selling them. Or worse yet, they're starting to get branchy and none of them are long and straight like a real cut flower should be. I mean, I'm experiencing that firsthand. So here's the question. Are you overplanting or under harvesting and not feeling like, I will tell you, I can nurse annual beds almost the entire season. I succession plant, so we have top quality always coming on. But I am typically still cutting from the beds that I first planted in spring throughout the summer. That doesn't necessarily work with cool season hardy annuals because we lose the cool season, right? But if you are not cutting your beds clean because you either don't have customers or you can't get to them, then you need to step back and reevaluate. I'm telling you, you could grow smaller and more efficiently and still get that number of stems or even more stems. Just a thought, y'all. And here's another thing. I'm thinking about this because, we're in fall and this is a real dried flower focused time of the year, and we're seeing a lot about it. And I've been talking about Ellen Frost's dried wreath webinar. And Ellen has an amazing concept that I think that flower farmers, if they wanted to, Ellen is, that local the designer that only uses locally grown flowers in her year-round business in Baltimore. And the only reason that she dries flowers, she doesn't buy flowers with the intention of drying them. They dry all the flowers they don't sell. So that means she has no shrinkage. Shrinkage is what the leftovers are that florists and supermarkets with fresh food and flowers throw away each week. That's the stuff that gets old before you can sell it, right? So Ellen, in her attempt to, make her margins as good as possible, is they never compost anything. All the flowers get air dried. They don't take any extra steps. It is a really fascinating method of fattening up your bottom line. And I think it's a really great way for new and upcoming flower farmers that have not found their way yet, meaning you probably have more leftover flowers than you ever dreamed, to potentially add another method. And as Ellen speaks of in a podcast that I did with her, and I don't know that it's been published yet, but I'll put the episode number in the notes of this podcast so you can reference it. Ellen talks about that there are lots of extra things you can do for dried flower, different methods, but she doesn't employ any of those because here's the bottom line, friends. When you're talking about business, she's trying to increase her profits, not add more labor or cost of products. So all she does is what I'm doing is she just air dries. That means you just have to have a place to hang them. And she talks about all that. And then this creates an opportunity, whether you're going to sell dried flowers to your existing customers or you're going to make something out of them. But I think that that's a missed opportunity too. That is a great consideration, particularly for flower farmers that are not submerged into their market yet, meaning you're not selling everything. You have a lot of leftovers. And so this time of the year, instead of just mowing down your beds, making your last cuts of all this stuff that you can hang to dry. So that and there's a lot of options with that. It's like, all right, I don't want to make wreaths, but I could see that I could sell the dried flowers to my customers that would do crafts of whatever kind, both commercially and my retail customers. Your last 2 bouquet subscription drop-offs could be dried flowers. Extend your subscription by 2 weeks. That could be this is like beefing up your profit, friends. This is the way we have to think of things. Least amount of labor with something you already have. This is called added value products. Friends, there are just so many possibilities. And now is the time to start mapping your possibilities and what you might want to change, because I'll say it again, you're the boss. You're the business owner. You are the only one that can change it. You're the only one that should change it. Along with, if this is a, husband, wife, partner, whoever is in cahoots with you, that's a part of your life. This is just a real time. And I steadily see people over and over and over again going straight for the most intense, labor-intensive, high-risk crops, and they fizzle out and die because they spend too much, have no success before they have a profit. And friends, I'm just here to tell you, it doesn't have to be that way. It does not. It can be so simple and so achievable if you keep yourself between the lines, keep yourself in your lane that you choose is your map. And it's really, really true. This growing cut flowers as a domestic grower, meaning a local market, no matter where you are in the world, wherever your local market is, there are ways. And there's ways to extend your season, or you might not want to extend your season. Maybe you're a school teacher. There's just so many possibilities, y'all. So I'm just going to give you a couple examples. So I already shared one example of friends that live, their farm market is where it's a destination vacation spot, meaning they are inundated with customers from June to like September. So they just grow tons of annuals and stock a market stand, and people stop there on their way to their vacation spots, right? So here's another model. Our good friends Jonathan and Megan Leiss of Springforth Farm, North Carolina, NC is at the end of their name on social media. They came to flower farming from this perspective that we're talking about. They were a young couple. They knew they wanted to have kids. They knew they wanted to develop their business around their family's needs. He's a firefighter. She was a kindergarten teacher. And the plan is that Megan would quit working and and become their stay-at-home for homesteading and to building their flower farm. They produce their own food. They even hunt and put up food. So this was really important to them. So they created their business model. It's evolved. They first started out where, they had tons of summer stuff. They had low sales, high work. They barely had time to do their vegetables. Then when they embarked on having their first baby, Julianne, that really set them to work to look how to make this whole model work for them. So he still works off the farm as a firefighter. She's a stay-at-home mom. They now have 2 babies. And they have tweaked their flower farming model that they farm on less than half an acre, and they did have just one greenhouse. Now they've added additional hoop houses, and they only harvest and sell as early as possible in February or March, depending on the weather, I think, with ranunculus and tulips and those types of crops in their houses. They only sell February, March, April, and May. They shut their harvesting business down at the end of May when the end of the biggest demand is, and then they grow their vegetables, put up food, and then in the fall, they go back to doing tons of planting for their spring. And so that allows their family to vacation. It allows their family to grow their own food. And do you see what I mean? They are growing incredible flowers and a business and having that great life because they deliberately did it. So it's doable, you guys. You can learn more. They actually did an on-demand course for us. It's called the No-Till Micro-Scale Flower Farm. And you can find it's like a 4-hour course, I think. And you can find and learn more about that at the Gardener's Workshop. And I'll put a link to their course in the show notes if you're interested. But they're just a great example of molding your business. So many people think, you know what, I want to go in business so I can run my life. But in fact, 99% of business owners allow their business to run them. And yeah, I know because I've been on both sides of the fence. All right, friends, consider your possibilities. That's what I'm doing all the time. And that's why you always see me adding and deleting and editing my business life because my personal life is always changing and I'm changing my business to fit that. So friends, again, this podcast is brought to you by thegardenersworkshop.com. I invite you to come on over, sign up for our farm news, which will keep you in the know of everything that is going on, as well as check out our online garden shop, our online courses, and our tons of free resources from our blogs and podcasts to videos. And we'd love to hear from you about what else you need from us. All right, folks, till we meet again. Ciao. Friends, I think one of the best ways to get a real feel for the vibe of whether a course is worthy, if it's for where you are in your business journey. And so I'm going to share with you a couple of reviews here. And this is what Rosie had to say about Steve and Gretel Adams of Sunny Meadow Flower Farm's course, Growing Cut Flowers in Hoops and Structures. Rosie says, "This course was by far one of the most valuable workshops. I am in my second year growing in hoop structures, and all of the ins and outs of structure and growing is covered. Wish I had taken this course a few years back. Gretel and Steve's knowledge, experience, advice, mistakes are all shared. A big 10 stars if there were that many to give. Worth the money and time. Thank you, thank you."